I am so excited to introduce you to our next speaker, Dominic Tshabalala. He is from Durban, South Africa, and thank you, Dominic, for joining us here today.
Melia, hi everybody. Thank you for the invite.
I want our audience to get to know you a little bit better, so let me share a few things about Dominic. Dominic is a fantastic father. He has a wife and 6 children, and I have heard that they are incredible, beautiful, very talented. Now, Dominic has graduated from the University of South Africa with a degree in with a bachelor's degree of commerce and industrial and organizational psychology. And that's a mouthful, and it's pretty impressive. And I'm excited for him to share his insight about the things that he has learned throughout the years. Now, he is a master storyteller. He's an incredible storyteller. He's always energetic and excited about what he is sharing. He's an entrepreneur. He is a speaker, a teacher, a coach, and the reason why he is really here is because he is a master at inspiring others to tell their stories. And so we are excited to have you, Dominic. And without further ado, I want to turn the time over to you.
Thank you. Perhaps the first story that I'll start with, it's not a story, but an explanation that in my culture, there's a saying in many African cultures, in fact, I should say, Africa is probably the most diverse continent in culture, in linguistics, in people's skin tones and so forth. But we say that we praise a man and we discuss him and his accomplishment only when he's dead. So when somebody goes through your bio like that, you'd expect it to be at your funeral. So thank you for the bio, but I'm very much still alive and I want many more years in me. Can almost smell him or imagine him coming defeated but very angry, full of dust. He had been working in the farm. He comes beaten but very dignified. And based on the way he walks, the family knows that this is trouble. And the mother is sad, heart starts pounding. The girls they're in disarray, dreading that they would hear what they feel he might say. And when he gets there, he says, let's pick up and move. And so he confirms their nightmare and they pick up and they move one more time, fourth time, fifth time, whatever it is. And they move from that mud hut to the next mud hut in someone's land where my grandfather would ply his trade and he would sell his skills in exchange for a body where he could live off land that just until then, a few years before, it belonged to him and his family. The only thing that he could have, the only thing that he could sell, which was his skill, so that his family could live on that land, not own it, but live from it, work on it, and they could be allowed to live there as foreigners in their own country, but because they could not own any land unless they had that little passbook, which was called a dompers. It was such stories that I heard about my grandfather, my mother's father, what you'd call a maternal father. In our language, we'd simply say that's my mother's father, or my mkulu. Mkulu means the great one. Directly translated, that's what we call our grandparents. They have greatness in them because they are living libraries. They tell stories. They are working museums, and they are the repository of all that we want and all that we long to be. So my grandfather died when I was 5. And how do I know all of these things about him? Like I said, I can almost imagine it as if I was there. I can hear the sounds, I can see the sights. And that's because of the many stories that I heard day after day being told by my mother, how stubborn he was and how many times they needed to move because he got into trouble. And he got into trouble because he refused to be treated the way that your average Black man was treated in those times by white people in South Africa. The equivalent of an N-word in South Africa, it's a K-word. The stories are replete with how many times he got into trouble, got evicted off land, lost a job, and got into a fight, got arrested because he just refused to be called that and to quietly walk away. His dignity would not allow him to be called that and for him to walk into a home and to be a husband and a father. And so, uh, Joyini Tshabalala, my grandfather, tall man, almost 2 meters tall, large hands, large, wide wingspan, very dignified. Very few pictures I have of him because of the time that he grew in, and because of the color of skin that he had. A picture was a great luxury, so I value the pictures that I have of him, and the pictures that I have of him complement the stories that I've heard of a man that loved his family, a man that would get into a fight brutally to defend his own dignity, a man sometimes that you would say was not wise enough to maybe bite his tongue or lower his head and walk away and keep his family on the land for 1 more year, 1 more month, 2 more years. There was just something about him and his spirit that wouldn't allow that. Those hands that got into those brawls and that could have gotten him killed. And I know that for a fact because there are stories that are incomplete because my mom and the other siblings that remember this were small and back then, especially within African culture, children were more seen and not heard. And there were things that you never asked, never asked. But many stories where the authorities were looking for my grandfather and they would come, break down the door, kick the door, um, terrorize everybody and looking for him. And there was a tree that he would spend the night in, night after night. And when he would hear that they are coming, and then he would spend the night there. And but there were times that he allowed himself to get arrested. So I would suppose that he did not at that time allow himself to be taken because he knew uh, he would disappear. Like it was so easy for Black people to disappear without rhyme or reason and without any legal recourse. And those same hands, though, that got into those brutal fights are the same hands that will allow Joini Shabalala, my grandfather, the great one, Mkulu, to come home during summer and to uncover a hole that he had dug somewhere by the mud hut or as he had progressed by the house that he already had. And he had a car by the garage, he would uncover that hole and he would unearth a large watermelon or some pineapple. And it was his pleasure and his place as a man in that family to be the one that gathers all of his girls. They had about 12 children and 8 girls lived. And because they didn't have access to great medical care and clinics, the 4 boys who were born did not live or didn't live to a very great age. So he had all of these surviving girls who were 8 or 7. And it was his pleasure and honor to call them around and he would gently slice. And my mother turned 65 turned 65 in December, and she remembers fondly the taste of that watermelon or the pineapple that would come from Baba, her father, as he sliced and shared with them and enjoyed that food with them. It brings great memories. We had watermelon for Christmas, and just those stories start all over again of what that meant to their family. The greatest way that we share what we know and we influence each other as humans, as mortals who walk the earth, is through stories, is through the spoken word. My purpose is to encourage you to tell stories, speak more, connect more. My aim through sharing of my story is to remind you of how we all grew up, It was not through a voice from YouTube or through some screen or the television. It was the voice of another human who was very close to us, who answered our question of why sugar is sweet or why the sky is blue, or what would happen if I ate all the food in the refrigerator. It was a human who answered those questions and told stories of what would happen if I touched the fire, um, what would happen if I ate everything that my eyes looked at. It was humans that developed us. It was stories they shared about how they grew up and how they got burned for the first time or how they fell. And when we're teenagers, it's stories that send us on a spin when we find out who mom or dad's first crush was and how they fancied a teacher in grade one or grade R. Well, you call it kindergarten. We call it crash or grade R. But it is stories that form those memories. It is stories that mark our coming of age. It's also stories, though, that weave the tapestry of our lives. Many of you are married now. It is a story how you came to be a married man or woman. There is a story behind your first child. There's a story behind the miscarriage. There's a story behind the struggle to just become parents. There's a story behind being parents of teenagers and children who choose what we hope that they don't choose and who repeat our mistakes. All of these stories make up our lives. Our life, our very existence on earth, is a story. And we are to share those stories so that life on earth can be richer, can be full, and we can pass on who we are to the next generation of humans. And we do that best through stories. We used to say when an old person dies in a village, it's like a library burns down. And that's because as Africans, of our great oral history, of the great tradition to tell stories. They're better than books. There are no books. There are no apps that will tell stories as well as humans do. There are no sound effects on any um, Marvel or DC movies that will have the effects that a human that tells a story with a heart will have, because humans can touch hearts and we can be authentic and we can be touched and we can be felt better than anything out of a screen. Dinner time is interrupted in families, particularly in African culture where the setting of the sun was a time for people to sit around the fire. And as we got urbanized, it was a time for everybody to be inside the yard, inside the family property, for them to prepare a meal together, to talk about their day together, to then eat a meal together, and for father to speak. And like in many African homes, there are in laws or grandparents who live in the home almost all the time because we rarely have old age homes. We like to keep our elderly, and we keep them so that they can tell stories, and it becomes their honor, it becomes their role to tell of the family, to tell of life, to tell of wars, to tell of what they've lived through to the children. The parents provide, the parents discipline and guide, but the elderly infuse identity through stories. They connect the family with the outside world. They build a sense of community. And because of their age, they also become the link between the world that is to come and the new world that is represented by these young new souls in the home. Whenever we tell stories, as you live today and you tell a story driving home, and I hope you do before you even get home behind that steering wheel, tell a story. Tell a story of what you learned. Tell about the great work that's done. All families have a great family story. And all stories that are told well have a moral point to them. Why are you telling the story? Why are you telling the story? Keep it simple. Teach a lesson through the story. And that's the moral point. because that story becomes intriguing because it becomes almost part of the crest, the family's crest in European culture of crest. It becomes part of the family crest. But the more important crest, the one that can't be touched, it's the tapestry of the family, the identity of the family to say, through what in my family, Joini Tshabalala did, what he is. There are some things I cannot allow myself to do. There are some things that I cannot bear another human to experience because it's just not in my blood. And how do I know that? Because my own grandfather did not stand for those. And it cost him dearly, but he stood for something. Those were his morals, those were his ethics, and I cannot do less. My children know why they need to be like this because it runs in our blood. Why are you telling the story? Keep it simple. When you tell your story, put yourself in the story. The story becomes better than what they would get off YouTube or off another great, interesting website or a marvelous television program. It becomes interesting, intriguing because it has you in it. If it does not have you, let it have somebody that they know, somebody that the audience knows. It's usually better if it's you because then they have an emotional connection to the story. They are listening to the journey or for the journey of their hero through the story. And believe it or not, you are the story. You are the hero. You are the protagonist of that story. We have been blessed as the human race with unlimited number of great storytellers. Shakespeare, you know, Oprah Winfrey, great storyteller. Sir Richard Branson, great businessman. But listen to the interviews that that man has. He never misses an opportunity to tell a story, to explain a point. We have the author of the great Harry Potter series. She is just amazing. She got kids interested in reading again, not because she wrote about what was fashionable or about the latest gadgets, but she knew how to tell a story of something medieval, archaic, old, distant. I mean, how distant can Harry Potter be to TikTok and Twitter and what our children are living through? But it's how she told the story. She told stories and she got the world reading. Tell stories. Do we run the risk of boring our children, especially the TikTok instant gratification generation with stories? Yeah, we do. My children don't often enjoy stories because each time I start, then they think, oh, there he goes again. I mean, he could have just explained this in 3 words and he's going to give us a 3 hour lecture. But they won't forget the stories, even if they remember them because they were boring, but they remember them. Let's tell stories. We tell stories because our fondest memories are of grandmother or mother or the distant uncle who will come and visit. And we don't remember how he wore or his cologne. It's the stories they brought, it's what they told us. Stories weave families together. Stories help us to connect without the other interruptions of the modern world. And my place that we do tell stories and that we realize that we are more able and capable than we give ourselves credit.
Wow, that was amazing. I have taken a lot of notes, so I'm going to just hit on a few things and maybe ask you a question or two if that's okay.
That's
Um,
okay.
your kids are very lucky that they have you as their dad because they may think it's boring, but I bet you're pretty entertaining storyteller. You're just like my father, who's always fun and has always had a story to bring to the table. There's a few things that I love that you said. And one of them, it started at the beginning when you talked about your grandfather, and you said that you call him the Great One. The translation of what's the word again that you call grandfather?
Mkulu.
Hulu?
Mkulu. And you'd spell that M for mother, Khul, for love, U. Mkulu.
Mukulu. I love that.
Yes.
I love
Yes.
that you said that um, also is their living libraries that the elderly sometimes in American culture we tend to there's nursing homes, we put the older people in somewhere else. But I love that your heritage is all about bringing those elderly into the home and taking care of them,
Yes.
because you said that they infuse our identity. I love when you said that, infuse the identity of us, because of who they were and the experiences that they had, and that they help us build community, you said. And I love that you said that we keep them because they tell us stories. And I think that
Yes.
that's such a great thing that you've had, your people have embraced, and something we definitely can learn more from here in America. And so thank you for sharing that. That was really, really powerful. How do you think stories can help create a better tomorrow, especially in Africa and all that's going on there? How is the oral stories? You said that most people aren't writing them down, so oral spoken word is which I agree with. There is a whole lot more feeling, the heart. You could feel the heart when somebody shares. As you're sharing with me, I could feel your heart. I could feel your sincerity. How does that play into the future of, like, of where Africa can go as we tell these stories and learn from your grandfather? You said that it's in your DNA, that you have to be courageous, you have to stand up, you can't let be bullied, you have to stand, and the consequences were great, like you said. So how does that shape the future of your people, your community?
I think stories, Melia, are more needed now than ever before. One, because the technology to actually record them in real time is there. We don't need stone tablets or brass plates or gold plates. We don't need to engrave, or we don't need papyrus. The Egyptians did that, our ancestors did that, and that was great. But right now, we can record the teller of the story in real time. One of the greatest losses, and in my humble opinion, one of the things that have led to a rapid loss of wealth, power, prestige, um, and spirituality. The Africans are naturally drawn to the divine, have always been. How have we fallen from that? I think it's because we've allowed our identity to be messed with. So stories have either been taken, stolen, or they have been diluted with untruth. And we have nobody to blame either than ourselves, because we are the carriers and the tellers of the stories. So we have dropped the ball in telling stories. Families have dropped the ball in telling those stories, because if the family unit had kept identity, had kept stories that encourage thrift and industry, Africa has not always been, well, at least my part of Africa, has not always been mechanized. And not because we were not inventive. No, because there was really no need. We didn't need the wheel because everything was within reach. We didn't invent the refrigerator because there was always food. The next day and the next day, there was more food than people. There's more cattle than people. Um, there was really very little need to go and have heavy industrial machinery to mine gold, because there were places you could just walk and sit down and with your hand pick up a few nuggets, or go to some river. And it's always been there, abundant there. But those stories have not been told, never made it to the history books and to the archives of nations, and were not kept by families. And the children, such as me, such as my grandfather, my father, my mother, who came out of those families, were none the wiser. The home in African culture has always been the primary school. Better than any other school or any other institution, the greatest influence over a person's mind and heart about what they know about commerce, the galaxy and the universe, humans, reproductive health, sociology, has always been from the home. And when we've not done that, we've landed where we've landed. So, why tell stories? How do they play into the future? I believe that's how we are going to rescue ourselves. That's how we are going to leapfrog into a people that are self reliant, have strong identity. We are going to leapfrog into a people that are innovative. We are going to leapfrog into a people that can add a lot of value to the greater human race because we have something to give. Stories can help to do that for us. But the challenge is they cannot be legislated, and they probably are not going to be done by politicians or government. It's individuals, it's in the home, it's the people who are attending the conference where we are exhibiting right now. Let them go, turn off the radio, and let them speak, and not the DJ or the radio presenter or the TV. Let them speak. And when you pick up the children from home, or from school, pardon me, or from the playground, let them speak. Believe it or not, they are telling a story. Let them tell stories. Let normalize them telling stories instead of us bombarding ourselves with media and with external sources that crowd our ability to tell stories and to connect. So I believe that at a mega scale, that is how Africans at home within families telling stories. That's how we are going to come to ourselves as it was with the prodigal son. When he came to himself, he acted differently because he came to himself. At the risk of being long winded, Melia, I'm a Tshabalala. And as a Tshabalala, I am a Mshengu, Udoma. Doma Vuso Akangwane, Ustowa Siltuli. Now, what are those? Those are my clan names. Any Tshabalala anywhere around the world, when he looks at me and when I look at him and I give him their proper honorific within the scheme of the human race, I say Mshengu. That's one of our progenitors. And we can carry on, and it's almost like a praise song. It's clan praises of our conquests, of our defeats, of our heroes and heroines, of places we've lived in. But all of these, it's almost what you see in the opening chapters of the New Testament in Matthew and Luke, as they were talking about Jesus Christ's lineage. I mean, those people are in what we call today the Middle East. And that was very normal. And it's still normal right now within African culture. It's normal in that it exists. What we need to normalize is boys like me and girls being taught this by their grandmothers, by their fathers, by their mothers, so that as they grow up, they say, I'm a Mshingu. It is unfortunately becoming more common for me to walk around and to see a 20-year-old or a 15-year-old, and if I say Mshingu, they would freeze because they know what they should say in return, but they don't. Because we are failing as adults to tell the story of who they are.
Everybody needs to hear that. If you didn't hear that, rewind and watch that again. That was really powerful. You said three things that I think are key to the question that I asked you, which is we need to save the stories and rescue ourselves and let our children speak. I think that as we do that, we will connect. And this isn't a problem just in Africa. This is a massive problem in the U.S. and probably every single place in the entire world that is connected to phones and connected to the internet. And as we as we disconnect from all of those devices and reconnect with our family through stories, I agree with you, Dominic. We can change the future,
We can, Melia.
but it starts with each family taking responsibility for their own family. Like you said, it's not going to be solved in government. It's not going to be politicians telling their stories. Each family needs to come to know who they are, their identity from their past, and the moments in the future and today that will continue to shape and to grow and to bless our society in a whole. So thank you so much. That was really powerful. So if our audience would like to connect with you, what is the best way that they could reach you, Dominic?
I'm on LinkedIn, just as if you go to Dominic Tshabalala, I'll show up on your LinkedIn search. I'm on Twitter as Tshabalala TV, so that's my surname and my initial, Tshabalala TV.
Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us here tonight. It's actually a 9-hour difference between the US and Africa. And so we were having some fun trying to get on the right time zone. But we're grateful that you could take the time and share with our audience the power of stories and the power that we have within ourselves to change our history by making sure that our history is never forgotten. So thank you again.
Thank you, Melia. Take care.